Good morning, everybody. How's everyone doing? We're starting a little bit early today on a Friday. Our good friend Vincent wrapped up his stream a little earlier today, so we figured, as not to step on any toes, it would be okay to start it off a little earlier. So with all of that being said, welcome. Some nice familiar names in the chat as always. Who do we have first? We've got Philip number 1. Good morning in the chat first. After that, Diana. Nice to see you, Diana. Familiar name around the channel as well. I love the little firecracker emojis. Good energy on a Friday morning. We've got Netstar, Tarushi, Ida, Matthias, Justin, John C. Welcome, John C. Naked Trader, not trader as in a trader, but a trader as in a trader. You can read his name and figure out what that means. We've got Kimberly, ABD, Captain G, Blackface, and Ivan tuning in just now. Nice to see everybody. Fantastic Friday morning. Octay as well. Hey-o. Morning. All right, what do we have on the docket? I actually forgot to fire up my little annotation tool, so we'll do that now. And here we go. So as always, taking a quick look at our economic news scheduled for the day. We've got NFP that came out just a couple of minutes ago, 10 minutes ago. It's 8:40 now. Obviously, that was scheduled for the 8:30 release. We'll see what happened with our market. The big thing is clearly the spike that we have to contend with from yesterday afternoon. That's going to be the primary focus of today's stream and analysis, and really what you should be watching throughout the course of the day, in my estimation, to get a stronger grasp on what's kind of going on out there in terms of how strong are these sellers. What's the market trying to do? Is it trying to balance? Is it trying to move lower or higher? We'll see how good of a job the market can do at trying to accomplish one of those outcomes. So in terms of economic, events, it was really NFP, and I don't really think that had a huge impact on the market. Maybe a little bit lower. We'll look at the chart in just a second, but that's all we got, right? That's all we got today. Let's quickly take a brief look just so we can understand what should be on the docket for next week. Pretty quiet on a Monday, nothing happening there. PMI, maybe some reactions from an FOMC member speaking. That's on Tuesday around 10:05, not 10:05. And then FOMC meeting minutes come out on Wednesday, 2 o'clock, as always, right? So big things, just some FOMC events next week. Keep it on, keep it on your radar, but not too important for today's session individually. So that's what we've got. We know that there's nothing in terms of earnings today, nothing happening before the open. However, just wanted to mention that BlackBerry reported after the close. So did AST Space Mobile. I know that some people have been watching that as the sort of new space play instead of Virgin Galactic, so on and so forth. So, they reported. Maybe we'll look at the chart. Because we started early, maybe we've got some extra time. We can take some requests. We'll see. I'm doing well, Diana. Thank you. I appreciate you asking in the chat. I'm doing pretty well. It's a little bit of a gloomy Friday here. It's dark, it's overcast and rainy, but we're working with what we got. It's a Friday, right? There's everything to be happy about. Week's coming to an end. Time to relax for the weekend. So, weather's not going to change my mood too much. Hope you're doing well as well. Anyways, jumping over to our ES futures, this is what we're always doing. This is the meat and potatoes of our presentation, essentially. What do we have going on? Well, here's the spike. So I do want to talk about the spike before we talk about our 3 questions. This is considered a spike, right? And it's really evident in the market profile. We'll look at it in that perspective in just a second. But it's this late day sell. It appears to come out of nowhere because the market is acting respectfully, just kind of, grinding to the downside instead of all out free fall mode in the morning and then free fall mode in the afternoon. So this strikes me as some pretty impulsive selling. It doesn't really strike me as a longer-term seller who's really looking to make something happen here. It strikes me as just panic. Longs with the worst trade location throughout the course of this move to the upside. So if we were to just flip this to a daily time frame chart, this might help visualize this. Anyone who was building a long up here, right? Worst possible trade location. We're extended through the daily double top. We're running out of momentum. We know that volume was tapering on the weekly time frames. We talked about all these things in the mid-week market update, as well as the weekly watch list on Sunday. Those longs are the ones who close. They panic, and that's kind of what gives us this nasty move to the downside. But because the market cut off, aka the market just simply closed, right, at 4 o'clock, 4:15 in futures here, we don't necessarily know whether or not these prices are fair. That's the basis of the spike, right? We don't know whether or not the buyers would have pushed it back higher and done something like this, 100% retracement. That would be a liquidation break. That would be bullish for the market. Or if we would have, found some consolidation and then boom, broke down. Now, don't get me wrong. We can see what's going on in the after hours here. A little bit of acceptance inside of the spike, and that is noteworthy. But this isn't regular trading hours session. This isn't truly the price action that we care as much about. So it's really all about what happens on the open. Now, I will say, based on our spike rules, and we'll talk about these, opening inside of the spike is a fairly neutral outcome. The market's looking for balance here. The market's trying to determine, okay, can we get some two-sided trade to happen here and accept these lower prices? That is, again, just fairly neutral, looking for two-sided back and forth acceptance in the spike. If we were to open below the spike, that's a more bearish outcome. We're not doing that, right? So we're not currently opening below yesterday's low of day. So it's not as bearish as it could be. Carry that forward. And it's also not as bullish as it could be. If it was bullish, it would have opened above the spike, negating all of this selling activity, and then it would have been back off to the races, noting that people who were short here are, it's the opposite, right? They're short at terrible location down towards the lows, and we're already moving away from their entry point, okay? So that's how we think about spikes. Nice to see some more names rolling in the chat. We've got Dinos Den, Gary, Roy R, and DP. Good morning to you guys as well. So I did want to briefly talk about the spike before we get into our 3 questions. So hopefully that was a good primer. Our 3 questions are, of course, number 1, are we opening inside or outside of balance, inside or outside of range? It's almost interchangeable, right? You'll notice that there's your high, there's your low, obviously. We're opening firmly inside of range, right? So no shock and awe, or there shouldn't be much shock and awe based on opening inside of range. Question number 2, where are we opening in relationship to the overnight range? So your overnight high is here, your overnight low is here. A fairly compressed range, I would add. So, this selling is an expansion of range. This is a contraction of range in the overnight. we're opening smack in the middle as of the 8:30 sort of release with what I would imagine was NFPs. A little bit of an adverse reaction. Is it the end of the world? No, not at all. We're still firmly inside of the spike, and this is the main thing that we have to contend with. You can see it even deserved a yellow level on our screen today. Spike top. That level is 45.68. Anyways, for question number 2, the answer is that we're opening in the midpoint of the overnight range, another neutral indication. Question number 3, how is the position of the overnight inventory? Is it net long, net short? What's the deal? Well, if you extrapolate yesterday's close right about here, you'll notice roughly 50% is below, 50% is above. What does that tell us as well? Fairly neutral, another indication just pointing to possibility for balance in this session. So, are we expecting shock and awe on the open? Absolutely not. Should we be patient on the open? Absolutely yes. Okay, that's how I would... Captain G, shock and awe. Let me quickly explain it. If we're opening outside of range, somewhere down here, and I know I'm drawing in volume, I know, but if we're opening underneath yesterday's low, that's shock and awe. People wake up, we're not inside of yesterday's range. They're like, oh, geez, like I got to do something. I got to either buy it because it's on sale, or I got to sell it because I think the momentum's firmly to the downside, right? So you're going to get emotional reactions whenever you're gapping outside of the prior day's range. Could be up, could be down, and in that case, you have shock and awe on the open. There's possibility for early morning trade. Either fill the gap or run with the gap, right? So that's all I mean by shock and awe. Opening so firmly in balance, inside of range, inside of the spike, inside of the midpoint of the overnight range. Overnight inventory is pretty balanced, 50-50 above and below. Not really seeing a reason for the market to have a whole lot of emotional response on the open is what I'm getting at here. Hopefully that firmly answers the question for you and anyone else who is curious. Good question. Nice to see you, Siju. Fantastic conversation with him the other day. And it's good to see him in the live stream. Thomas, nice to see you as well. Great. You view the futures action as weak, ABD? Yeah, I mean, it's not strong. Don't get me wrong. It's not like this is an overwhelmingly strong rally off of this sell. I would certainly agree with you on that. But it's also not as weak as it could be, opening below yesterday's low, opening below the spike. So I'm fairly neutral on the open, to be quite honest with you. I would watch, and something I'm going to be thinking about on the open is, okay, do we put in a balance, and then what happens really at the spike top or the spike base, basically yesterday's low of day, right? These are the two inflection points that I'm going to be watching, spike top and spike base, yesterday's low. All right, let me illustrate what the spike looks like over on a market profile chart. So here we are on the ES, and it's way zoomed in because I was looking for the actual number, but let me auto fit this for us. There we go. And here we go. There's your spike. Okay, you can clearly see a long lower post of single prints, right? The end period overlaps, but that's the 15-minute period that the cash market is not open for. So, end period, yeah, it's important, but it's also not, it's not going to prevent this from being a spike, is what I'm getting at. So what can we learn about the market profile? Again, it's telling us that the spike's there in the first place. You can see how compressed the overnight range is, forming a nice balance here. It's not overly net long or short. We know that there's balance there. We're getting two-sided trade in the spike. Again, not a whole lot more to read into other than market should find some sort of balance in this area. And if we take out the low or take out the top, that's where the next move should come from. To the downside, let's say we do take out yesterday's low and we continue lower. What can we see on the market profile that would be interesting? And not really, like, this is all strikes me as balance in here. I'd really probably just want to look at the ES chart, regular candlestick chart, to look for some supports underneath. And to the upside, obviously taking out the top of the spike, you're just looking for a rotation back closer to yesterday's high, which is a poor high. Okay, carry that forward. Yesterday's high was a poor high. All right, so that's our ES futures in a nutshell. Let's see what we got for, let's do it here. All right, let's do it here. We'll go out to a larger 30-minute time frame to find downside targets. If the market is going to continue to the low side underneath yesterday's low, I would start watching out for this right around here, 4,500. Right, 4,500 is really next up below. Not only is it psychological, but we had congestion, resistance, support, right? So it's the market, if it moves lower, is probably going to want to target this area here, right around 4,500. That's your downside. Your upside, as we mentioned, is just going to be back towards yesterday's high of day, okay? Wouldn't push my luck. I wouldn't automatically assume it has to be upside just based on, opening in the spike. But if we take out the top, again, maybe we start to lean on longs if there's price acceptance above, right? So that's what I would think about there. Value area high is also striking me as important. Yeah, carry this level forward as well. Value area high Important just based on a break and possible retest, okay? So you have support, its value area high from yesterday's session. If there's a turnaround, that should act as resistance now that we're below it. That's 45.80 roughly, okay? So that's what we've got in our ES futures. That was a pretty comprehensive look this morning. We started early so we could afford the time. Let's go on over and check out some of our sectors. What do we have up for sectors? XLK. What's going on in our XLK, the tech sector? Let's see, pulling back, obviously. Where is it in relationship to prior daily pivots? It's, coming back down underneath this in today's pre-market. You can see we're slated to be opening in that spike, just like the ES. Spike top is sort of in here. The morning low, which was around let's call it 160 just for round number's sake. Anything that remains under 160 in your XLK continues to look for two-sided trade inside the spike. Anything that's above, a little bit more bullish. Anything below, obviously looking for that follow through to the downside eventually. The big level to hold in your XLK, this is like big thinking, has to be here, 154.60, okay? So as of right now, again, the market's just experiencing some healthy pullback after a monstrous rally to the upside. Keep in mind some context here. Pullbacks are welcome, right? It's going to give us, if we do something like this, a nice risk reward. Like as we start confirming that we're going to get the bounce here, if that happens in the first place, your risk just goes right under the low. Now there's a much better entry for some of these levels, right? So that's what we've got in the XLK, looking neutral to slightly bearish, opening in the spike. I'll give it that. So on a day-to-day basis, today's intraday basis, neutral to slightly bearish so far, right? Next up, we'll move on over to the XLF. What do we have here? XLF Financials, serious breakdown, right? So what I was watching was the failure to hold on to that 38.67. There we go, 38.65, roughly that area. In the pre-market, though, notice how we're consolidating right at it, okay? So use that as an over-under. If we start falling back down on the open, then that to me is a pretty bearish indication, getting more acceptance towards the spike instead of negating it. But because we're opening so close to the top of the spike, there's potential that if we pop above, shorts with poor location down here start to cover, and we remain in balance on the daily, okay? It's not really a bullish implication for the SPY, but it is more neutral, right? More neutral. So watch your XLF. Let's quickly take a look at rates as well. TNX is going to do it for us. So we did see, interesting. So I would have thought the opposite. I wasn't watching rates yesterday, but I would have imagined with the XLF selling off so hard, something was going on with rates, continued downside off this resistance, but nonetheless, it was a gap up. Or no, okay. I'm all over the place. This is showing the activity early. So it was a move lower in rates yesterday that caused that XLF lower. So if rates continue to hang out here, move higher, and in the pre-market they are looking pretty good, watch your XLF to maybe recapture that level, okay? So that's something to carry forward. Rates are starting to perk back up off the lows and the sort of sell from yesterday. So keep an eye on that. That strikes me as interesting, the fact that XLF is trying to rebound above the spike as rates are picking back up. So just watch this level. Again, just to keep it simple, if you don't want to watch too many things, XLF, watch 38.67. Above, maybe that's a more neutral thing for the S&P, and it does not continue to sell off, right? It's more neutral, just kind of goes sideways. So those are the two big sectors. XLV, I did also want to mention, it's the third heaviest weighted sector that we're watching. On the daily, it's giving us a bit of a break and retest, okay? So what I like here is pullback, establish that as resistance, also prior resistance here, break, retest. Are we going to hold here for support and then continuation of trend is the question. That's the question, okay? In the pre-market, we're opening, much more firmly away from that 136.80. It strikes me as being a first step in potentially holding here. And it's not like you're going to trade the XLV, but you want to start looking at names like the UNH, right? Oops, not UNH, there we are. Like, is this going to be a viable pullback in UNH? Maybe, right? If this does pull back aggressively, like let's say we have another day of selling in healthcare and we start coming into 500, that strikes me as a decent, long risk reward for more upside, right? Reasonable little pullback here, especially if the XLV gets a break and retest and hold. What's going on with like PFE, Pfizer? This one already starting to see more of the aggressive pullback already, but does this bull flag, remain intact if the XLV gets the break and retest and holds? Maybe, right? So it's just things to keep an eye on, right? So XLV, watching for that break and retest on the daily. If it holds, maybe some healthcare names start to come into play to the upside is what I'm getting at. All right, let's bring it all home with the SPY itself. I know that some people prefer to look at the SPY instead of the futures. What's going on here? What are the levels that you want to pay attention to? Certainly, what I find interesting about this actually, and this is on the SPY, not the ES, the cash market here, you'll notice that the gap ups and the gap close is also the spike base, or top rather, because it's a downside spike, right? And that number is 455.85. Currently, again, all the same implications as what we just discussed in the ES. I'm not going to rehash all of that, but it's noteworthy that this is also the gap fill area to the downside. It's where the more aggressive selling stemmed from. If we come back up and retest it, 455.85 seems important to me as something to carry forward. So watch that as potential resistance. As we know, after that, right in here as well. So 456.50 is also a break and retest level potentially. If I grab some more time, we'll go out to a 5-day. You'll notice on that, if I do something like this, you'll notice support, 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 resisted into the afternoon. And again, if we can recapture the top of the spike, there's still a significant amount of overhead resistance there. 457, 456.50s if you wanted to go lower, right around in here, right? So watch those levels on your SPY. All right, that's what we've got in the SPY. We've hit all of the nails on the head there. Let's continue along, talk about the QQQ and IWM. So QQQ, NASDAQ 100, what do we see here? Certainly, spike to contend with. There's no difference, right? The same sort of theories will apply. We're opening in the midpoint of the spike. We're not opening below the spike. We're not opening in the most bearish outcome. So this is more neutral right off the bat. The spike top is a little bit more well-defined, not only because we have resistance in that last upper wick, but if you look at the morning low, the afternoon double bottom low, it's the same level, right? So that's 364.62. That's your critical watch here in the QQQ. If we pop back above it, again, more of a bullish indication for the marketplace. If we remain below, neutral, taking out yesterday's low, obviously more bearish, right? On the break of yesterday's low, we should be looking at 357.50. And then after that, my line in the sand, as I've been discussing for the past couple of days, is 352. I do not want to see the QQQ underneath 352 at this point in time. Mustafa asks, will the S&P test any level below 45.50? Well, I do believe we're already trading underneath 45.50, right? We're trading underneath 45.50. So I suppose the answer to that question automatically has to be yes. So we'll see, right? We'll see. Anyways, back to what we were doing, QQQ, opening in the spike. Again, think balance in the spike, and then the more directional move can be produced up and over the top of the spike at 364.62 or underneath the low of day yesterday for follow through to the downside. First level to watch, 357.50, right? That's what we've got in the QQQ. Continuing along, IWM Russell 2000 and the small caps. What do we see on the small caps? Again, this is a pretty disheartening move for the buyers in my estimation. Not really looking fantastic. Failed break of this flag, failed recapture of 208. We're also, underneath that gap fill area that did not hold as support. So is it a fake breakout? Yeah, at this point, I would certainly start classifying this as a fake breakout. The line in the sand now is, of course, 204. If we remain above 204, fine, not the end of the world, but it's certainly not great. All right, it's certainly not great. If we remain above 204 and start breaking above 208 once again, that's a little bit more promising, but now obviously we have some things to contend with instead of seeing an easier breakout to the upside. And again, thinking about this as more of a risk-on, risk-off signal for the marketplace, this is more neutral, just falling back down into the flag consolidation. It would certainly start to become more bearish again if we take out 204 and more of an indication that, hey, maybe the market's not actually ready for that risk-on move in SPY and the QQQ. All right? So carry that forward in the IWM, choppy in here, better over 208, worse under 204. In terms of pre-market indications, you can see, spikes kind of in play. Overnight high is also the base of top of the spike, 206.50. As long as we're below that, again, I would just look for chop in here. Not really overly directional in IWM, just kind of using it as that market sentiment indicator. So that's what we've got in the broad market. Good morning, everyone else who's been tuning in. Nice to see some more familiar names. JVP, Dory, Dark Trader, M. Spears. Nice to see you all. All right, let's get into our core list of companies. And, we're doing great on time. We've got 8:59, so maybe there's enough time for some requests as we come, towards the end of the presentation. Anyways, we've got Apple up first on the chopping block. Extremely bearish. The reason I say that is because in the pre-market, you can see at first we were slated to be opening in the spike right around in here, but clearly past couple of 15-minute bars are certainly moving to the downside, and we're opening on a gap down. So is this an exhaustion move to the downside? I wouldn't say that just yet, noting that, again, you have a lot of longs up here who are starting to feel panic if they were late to the party. So I would watch out for something like this. If Apple gets a little bit of continuation on the bell but supports at 172.65, That strikes me as much more interesting for long opportunities off that level, noting that we had prior resistance, then flipped to support, right? If I scrunch up the chart a little bit, can we see that? Yes, we can. Let me pop it on auto. Nope, so I guess we can't see it. Need more time. 10 days should do it. There we go, 172.65. Prior resistance leads to a break, holds in the regular trading hour session, holds in the regular trading hour session, back off to the races. So 172.65, important level to the downside, especially if this gap sees some more exhaustion to the downside. We open and continue lower. I would certainly be watching that for potential reversals in Apple. First target on a reversal off of it would be the opening print. And then if we go through the opening print, watch for the gap to potentially fill to yesterday's low. Whoa, not a fan of that. Let's go back to auto. There we go. Yesterday's low is going to be right here, 174.40. All right. So that's my play in Apple, probably watching for a little bit more downside. And if we support at 172.65, looking for longs to fill the gap. All right. If it doesn't turn around there, it's kind of off the table for me. I'm not trying to short this pullback. I'm trying to find buy points in the pullback, all right? That's what we've got. Apple, done, complete. Next, Netflix. What do we see in Netflix? Opening firmly inside of the flag range. Okay, so daily flag range right here, look above and fail, did pan out. If we take a look at our intraday, you'll notice that this one never produced a spike. It never produced a new low in the afternoon. We're kind of opening right at the close from yesterday, the support from yesterday. So this one's much more interesting to me. It doesn't strike me as nearly as bearish as Apple like we just saw. But keep in mind also, it didn't make as impressive of an upside move. So there's that aspect as well of relative weakness. Anyways, as we remain inside the flag range, I would have to favor a downside move simply because of the look above and fail. But if you're not already short, like if you didn't short somewhere on the breakdown in here, smaller time frames, like 5-minute time frames, there were some setups or took the break of yesterday's low, prior day's low, right? Wednesday's low on the Thursday session. There we go. Then I wouldn't chase it short here, but you are looking for follow through to the bottom end of the flag here. We'll see what happens at 370. Essentially, is the patience play in Netflix. If it wants to bounce off of it, fine. We remain in balance. Target might then be the top end of the range, right? So patience required on Netflix opening in the midpoint, but not nearly as bearish as Apple like we just saw. If it wants to put in a breakout candle up above 379, maybe there's a quick scalp up towards the top of the range at 382.75. But again, I really think that it's a patience play in Netflix, not seeing something obvious this morning. Tesla up next. What do we have in Tesla? Okay, Tesla daily, a little bit of a consolidation range up at the highs. We have a resistance trend line in place. If we zoom in on our intraday, you'll notice something interesting here. Unlike Apple and continuing the move to the downside, this one's actually trying to negate the spike. So there was a little bit of a spike underneath this 1082. Notice that we've now made it to that area. We explored a little bit above. Now we're pulling back a little bit, but use 1082 as your pivot. If we're above, more neutral. I wouldn't be bullish on Tesla until we break the resistance trend line. I'll zoom out in a second to show you that. But if we remain underneath 1082 and then break yesterday's low, maybe it's continued downside to the top of the daily gap at 1054. Okay, so that does become attractive actually. Anything that's bearish underneath 1082 for consolidation then cracks yesterday's low, maybe it's lower to the top of the gap. Okay, that strikes me as a something worth watching. The resistance trend line, to point out where that's coming from, you get a double top here. So anchor, touch 1, sort of touch 2 in here. It's not the cleanest thing in the world, but you get the sense that if we break that, we would start to be putting in higher highs instead of lower highs. So that's where you could start to get bullish on Tesla. But again, it doesn't really strike me as the first thing that should happen on today's session. So neutral if we're above 1082, bearish if we're below, looking for breakdowns of yesterday's low and continuation to the downside. Next up, AMD. What do we have in AMD? Someone asked about AMD in the chat. With AMD downgrades, do you see it breaking 100? I don't know. To be quite frank with you, I really don't know. 100 is a very serious support. If we scrunch up the daily, support. So it is a serious level. It's also the psychological 100. I believe the downgrade numbers were to 115. I don't really know what that, I'm not a fundamental analyst is what I'm getting at here. Do upgrades and downgrades carry weight? Yeah, but the technical chart's always going to pave the way. In my estimation, 100 seems like a solid support as of right now. We haven't tested it in quite some time. Let's just imagine, like just for the fun of it, that today we put in a 10-point candle to the downside from the top all the way to the bottom, no stopping. It's just red, red, red. To me, basically, that would be an extended move to the downside. Look at this. 1, 2, 3 days would take us from 124 down to 100. Would I want to be a seller and looking for the 100 break to the downside at that point in time? No, absolutely not. And as a matter of fact, I'd probably be looking for that to act as support, right? So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my thinking around the 100 level. Could it be achieved this week or, early next week? Maybe if the momentum, holds up as it has been. If we take a look at the intraday charts here, I'm going to clean this up. This is quite hectic. Let's remove a lot of these levels. The support trend line is no longer in play, obviously. Let's remove that. Remove that. Okay, here we go. So we have a gap overhead, obviously. That came with the downgrade. We're breaking, and we closed yesterday underneath 110. We're currently slated to be opening inside of this chop balance from the afternoon. You'll notice that the overnight high and this afternoon pivot high are fairly aligned. If we can take out 111.15, 111.50 for those of you who want a little bit more confirmation, I would say we could move through this thin structure with relative ease. Target should be in here, 113.50, okay, right where we were getting this congestion. That's what I would watch out for if this is going to get an oversold bounce on today's session. If we break yesterday's low, which is not the strongest area, notice all the equal touches that we have down here around 109. If that cracks, just monitor for downside continuation. But just remember that you're coming off of 2 aggressive down days. Could it start to become a little bit oversold? Yeah, it could. So I wouldn't push your luck too far to the downside, right? Use a trailing stop if we break 109. So that's a cleaner chart and cleaner levels to be thinking about on AMD into today's session, at least. The consolidation down here strikes me as being more bearish than bullish, obviously. But if we do crack that overnight high and the afternoon pivot from yesterday, maybe there's a quick scalp to be had to the upside for the oversold bounce, right? So play it just based on levels. Facebook up next. What do we have in Facebook? 906. We're moving right along. Facebook breaking the uptrend on yesterday's close, basically. If we take a closer look at what's happening, I'm going to actually drop this back down to a 2-day. We'll go 3-day. That way we're not scrolling through so much data. There we go. We're opening in the spike, right? So spike rules will apply here inside of Facebook. In the spike, two-sided trade moving back above 223.75, slightly more bullish indication, more neutral, right? Just remaining in consolidation here on the daily. If we crack 222.20, 222.22. Wow, look at that. Anyways, if we crack that, 217 is the must-hold area, right? Based on the daily break, retest, then we want to see something like that. I would watch out for hammer candles that print. Obviously, with the open where it is currently, slated to be opening in range up here, we're not going to print a hammer candle on today's session like this. I mean, maybe that happens, but I don't really imagine that's a likely outcome. So I would just want to see if this does continue lower. Fine, what happens on Monday's session? Are we able to print a hammer off 217? Can we reverse off of that? That's kind of my thinking here in Facebook. Again, guys, I'm not thinking about shorting these pullbacks. I'm really trying to find the buy points in many of them, all right? So that's what we've got. Facebook. Nvidia up next. What do we see in good old Nvidia? It's got to hold 272, right? 272, 270-ish area. Prior resistance, then support for the 2 days in here. Pulling back on the daily respectfully. Not overly aggressive. Notice how the value's all overlapping. So overlapping. That's respectful. If it's just breakaway to the downside, that's where the sellers are getting a little bit ahead of themselves and you get, really big volatility swings. But this is respectful pullback after a very nice breakout, right? So let's quickly take a look at the overnight implications. Opening close to yesterday's low. There's no real spike in play here. I would watch and just continue to monitor that 272 level that we pointed out. If we, on today's session, come in and just start putting in consolidation here, I wouldn't be overly aggressive looking to short that if we break the lows. Instead, I would be looking for any reversal pattern. So if we do put in a W, double bottom, break of the neckline, maybe it's back higher to remain off the bottom of the range, back to the top. Target should probably be the resistance trend line first, but that's still a solid trade on the intraday, right? You're looking at from 273 up to 278 potentially. That's a solid amount of deltas to be picking up. So I'm really watching this 272 to act as support, quite frankly, because we have all of this data around it. But if it does break, again, I'll watch for it to move into this range here. Then we'll see where the next sort of bottoming pattern starts to develop. If it's at or around 258.77, 260, fantastic. That's another reasonable pullback. However, your upside target in something like this is not going to be as aggressive because we risk the possible head and shoulders, right? Something that does this. Very speculative in terms of what's happening right now, but something to be thinking about, right? So that's what we've got in Nvidia, 272 main focus for the day. Microsoft up next. What do we see in Softy? Pulling back 3 days of balance, 3 equal highs roughly around 315, 82. What do we see in terms of a spike? Definitely in play. 311 is basically the number. It's a little bit underneath 310.60, about 50 cents underneath. Let's adjust it. I'll adjust it. I'll do it. Fine. You guys are going to make me do it. There we go. All right, 310.57. back to being serious, right? So support broke, led to that spike lower in the afternoon session. You can see it's also the pre-market high, which is why I was willing to move it there from 311. As long as we remain in here, look at what we got, right? Really choppy activity. It was higher, it was lower, it was higher, it was lower. Now we're getting consolidation. It was lower, it was higher. Choppy in here, above 310.57, neutral, getting more daily consolidation, bullish in the overall context of the daily chart. If we break yesterday's low, look for 305, right? We know 305 was a big breakout point. Again, I'm going to have to flip this chart to something like a 5-day. Might even have to be more than 5. Let's just go to 10 so I don't mess it up. There we go, 305. Resistance, resistance, support. If we pull back into it, you want to see that act as support from the daily perspective to do a break and retest. Break, retest, hold. Fantastic. Maybe we get trend continuation, okay? So those are my levels in Microsoft. If the move is higher above 310.57, again, more neutral, just getting consolidation here. I wouldn't push it long, all right? Amazon, last but not least, the beast. What do we have? Yeah, Stefan, screw it. We'll do it live. Isn't that the tagline someone said? Someone said that, famous on TV. Anyways, we're doing it live. Amazon, what do we see on Amazon? 3 days of aggressive pullback. Spike is certainly in play. Oops, we want the zoom function. Zooming in on our 15er. Breaking the low there led to the spike in the afternoon, slated to be opening right in the midpoint of the spike. Chop underneath this 3290. Well, let's call it 3290, 3291. Round it off to whatever you'd like, but as long as we're underneath that, chop, acceptance in the spike. If we break above, more neutral. Again, it's not really a long in Amazon if we crack back above because we do have that 33.35. You're kind of trading in this choppy point right here. I would want to see, more confident longs up and over 33.35. Okay, so if we do something like this, kind of neutral on the day. All right, if we break yesterday's low, obviously 32.60, look for continued pullback. Daily support trend line should be the target, and you'll see if you print some sort of reversal bar off of it, intraday reversal bar around it. That would be something to watch out for. And where is that roughly? Depending on time of day. What? No, there's no way. There's no way. It's not that low. It's probably because we have the pre-market data skewing things. If we turn that off, yeah, there we go. So in the regular trading hours session, it's probably going to be, depending on when we get there, 32.20 in Amazon. Okay, watch that for downside support. All right, that's what we've got. No requests until we get 100 plus likes. Yeah, maybe that's a reasonable thing to do. We've got 220, 210 people in here, 74 likes. Hit the thumbs up button if you do want some requests coming in after we move through a couple of these ideas. We're doing great on time, 9:12. So I only have a couple things to point out, right? China stocks gapping up on news, right? So let's quickly take a couple of looks there. Baba, first one that comes to mind. Still have our old levels on there. Good old Alibaba. Something that we still watch, but it's just not in the core list of companies anymore. Regardless, gapping up over red. This is always something that you need to pay attention to, right? So here we go. Whenever you see a big red candle, there's a lot of selling activity, obviously, right? Whenever you're gapping up over that, everyone who was a new short on yesterday's session is being proven wrong. So this is something where you watch for a squeeze to unfold. And by squeeze, I just mean added buying pressure. I do not mean that this has to go, quote unquote, to the moon, as the cool kids say. So gapping green over red, always a very interesting setup. Possibility for some sort of added buying pressure. So what do you watch on a setup like this? Let's clear the drawing set just because, we're not trading down there anymore. From the intraday chart, okay, you basically want to know where's yesterday's high. 115 is the number. Where's the overnight high? Okay, so if we do something like this, pull back and respect 115.08, or if we just respect the opening print after a drive higher and then consolidation, something like this, your long is in two places. If we get the pullback trade, it's up and over the opening print for the overnight high at minimum, if not higher after that. That's trade number one if we get a pullback. And hold the gap, right? I should mention that as well. Stop goes underneath the low of day. Number two is, okay, we do get that drive higher and we do something like this, respecting the opening print. We're getting all price acceptance above. Everyone short late to the party here panics and they close. There's your buying pressure. Break of the overnight high takes us to the next daily structure. I would say there's at least room to run into 120, if not higher, closer to 124. Okay, so that's what I would watch out for in Alibaba, and this sentiment is going to apply to anything in the Chinese sector that's essentially gapping green over red. Okay, green over red. Very, very important thing to watch. Right? So think about the psychology here. Nasty selling day. Everyone assumes it's got to be lower. Look at the daily bar. Nasty. Closes weak. Dead on the lows. To negate all of that in an overnight gap higher, yeah, you're going to get a lot of disappointed people this morning waking up thinking, okay, good, Alibaba's going to collapse again. It's going to go back to, it's going to 100, it's going to 90, it's going to fill this gap down here. Nope, shut them right off. Shut them right off. So we're opening above. As long as you get one of those two scenarios, it looks bullish in my estimation for longs. You can apply this to almost anything that is doing this, right? So JD is probably another one. JD, gapping green over red. KWEB is the KW, not EW. KW, geez. All right, let's start over if you want to be that way, ThinkerSim. KWEB. There we go. There we go. So this is the ETF, right? So the ETF gapping green over red, big time, like even way better than Alibaba, right? So that's interesting as well. Another one is Billy, BILI. What do we see here? Green over red. We covered JD, KWeb. You pick any of those Chinese stocks, right? They're all doing the same exact thing based on a release. I believe that they're going to start allowing the U.S. to see some balance sheets, or there's something going on. There was a news release. Doesn't really matter what it is. The importance isn't significant, but the gap green over red is. All right, so that's what I've got for you in Chinese stocks. GME stock split is the next one. I'm sure a lot of people actually want to see that in the chat here. It's on our docket. This is not something I recommend you trade regularly. But because they announced the potential for a split, because this thing's been on a tear to the upside recently, because it's big in the headlines, let's talk about it as well. What do we see on GME? Well, first of all, 200, 195, this general area right here, here and here. Let's just treat that as a range, 195 up to 200. Because of the volatility here, that's easily traveled. I mean, look at the open, right? Nasty upper wick, nasty move lower, big snapback to the upside. Volatility is high, so a 5-point range isn't the end of the world to be patient for inside of GameStop. So here's the big move on the announcement that, hey, we might do a split. A split ultimately does not change the value of the stock. People just look at it as being some sort of excuse to be bullish about the company's intentions, right? What is the company thinking? Oh, it's going to split. They want to attract new investors. It's got to be a good thing, right? So it's just an excuse to potentially, pump the stock price higher. Does it mean that it deserves to go higher? Maybe, maybe not. But ultimately, if we just stick to technicals, what do we need to watch for here? Well, a couple of things. We're opening on a clear gap higher. We want to know where yesterday's high was. We want to know where the overnight low is, basically because we did see a reasonable flag consolidation in the overnight. So we want to use the structure lows and just play very simply off of these levels. If the move is going to be higher and we're going to see a massive breakout and rally on GameStop, it's basically got to be long and clear that resistance zone up here. Not only is it pre-market resistance, but as we just saw, it's also daily resistance up here, right? Daily resistance up here as well. So be mindful of that to the upside. Don't just assume that it's got to be higher. I would say, the better long is something that does this and then breaks and clears 200 with some importance, or momentum rather. If we crack the overnight low pullback level, 185.40, watch for the gap to fill, right? It's as simple as that. Overnight inventory, who got 2 net long up here, excited about the gap and go potentially. Everyone's excited about the split. As soon as some of these people start folding because they're not getting paid, that's the instance where you get the gap and trap. You fill the gap and you're down to 175.65. So the way that pans out, here's your open. Fail to make it anywhere close to that 195, that 200, basically any rejection up there. Look for shorts through the open to close the gap, right? That's what you watch for. So GameStop, a lot of news, a lot of headlines, a lot of emotions going on out there, but keep it simple. Just watch the levels, use the framework, right? That's what we've got. So, all right, we did achieve more than 100 likes. I don't know what the number is. It's hidden because my screen is vertical. I can't expand it large enough to see what it is, but it looks like we cracked 100 likes, so thanks for that. Anyways, we'll take some requests. So I'm going to scroll back up. We're going to start from scratch. We've got about 10 minutes until the bell. All right, what do we got? Looking for the first tickers that came into the chat. SEDG, not even sure what that is. Probably a penny stock. SD or SEDG. There we go. Now, okay, not a penny stock. Not sure what this is. Let's come to the trade tab. Solar Edge Technologies Inc. Interesting. How's the liquidity on it? Let's quickly check the trade tab here. Okay. So for me, it's going to be stay away. It's going to be a stay away. Not only are the option spreads massive, you can see that there's a reasonable spread. The puts actually aren't too bad. But the spreads on the call side are pretty massive, and the open interest is not even over 1,000. It is in some places on the put side, but for me, I'm not going to trade options on something that has a chain that looks like that. Just getting consolidation here. It looks choppy in this range, not overly convinced. So, if it's working for you, do what's working for you. But to me, no real setup in this range till it breaks one way or another. And the options don't even look that attractive. HD is the next one. Home Depot, that's what I'm talking about. Solid name. Thanks for the recommendation from Shaquille. What do we have in HD? Potential for a double bottom. Yeah. So on your daily, there's your double bottom if it holds around this 300, 299 level. There's no guarantee that it holds as of right now, right? We currently closed a pretty bearish candle right at the level, closed dead on the lows, increase in volume. So I wouldn't say it's just an automatic long for the double bottom, but over the course of time, you could watch out for something like that. Obviously, for that trade to unfold, if this is a double bottom, your neckline's way up here at 340. So for longer term trades, yeah, it's going to require some patience. If you're a scalper, let's see what we have going on from yesterday's session. Pretty nasty. Big bear flag, bear pennant on the open, dribbles lower into the afternoon session, opening underneath or kind of in the consolidation from the afternoon. Strikes me as bearish, so I would not jump onto this one immediately at 300, just expecting some sort of big turnaround for this to magically start acting as a double bottom, right? Any consolidation that hangs out low down here on the daily does something like this, it's a bear flag. Right? Bear flag, that would turn into a flush point eventually. So if we put in a lower high, equal low reattempt, breaks down, right? So be mindful of that in Home Depot. But yeah, I could see 300 as starting to act as a critical pivot. It's a good place to start watching the stock, seeing what the next move might be. But I don't think based on how we've arrived here, it's just an automatic long on the open. So that's Home Depot. Next up, keeping it in order here. I got to scroll back up, back down. Home Depot, some people, we covered AMD. LGVN. What's LGVN? LGVN. Long Evron, I believe, is the name of this one. Covered it in the past on the secondary channel. Looks like there's some momentum happening here. Let's clear the drawing set. Start from scratch. Pre-market's gapping up. So solid move to the upside. Not sure if there's got to be some sort of news or something going on. Doesn't really matter. Whenever we're dealing with a gap up, the gap rules will apply. We're going to want to know where yesterday's high was, where the overnight high was, and the current opening price is slated to be right at the overnight high. So basically, apply the gap rules, right? If we fail to take out the overnight high and start trading lower through the opening print, I would say also underneath this level right here, 1533, the consolidation from this flag, that's a short to fill the gap, right? Are you going to short this thing in the first place? On the trade tab, it's hard to borrow. There are no options here. So no, you're not actually going to short this thing. Would I chase it up here at the highs? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This is not something... look at what this has done in the past. Is there possibility that it runs up towards 40? Yeah, there's always the possibility that these things can happen. But my advice to anyone who's trying to trade these types of names, don't try to chase shiny objects. Maybe that's a one learning lesson you can take away from today's session. Chasing shiny objects will get you burnt 9 times out of 10. What happens if you long this up here and it pulls back? Where are you going to place your stop loss? Is your stop going to be underneath this consolidation from yesterday afternoon? Well, what if it holds at yesterday's low, right? Because that was a gap up. Okay, so should you place your stop underneath the gap fill down here? I mean, look at what you've just done. You've entered up here. You're saying your stop is going to go here, and you're expecting it to go to 40? Yeah, I mean, good luck. Good luck. Again, chasing shiny objects, it's not for me. If you find some sort of strategy that works for scalping these types of things, that's fine. And I would say do what works for you. But for me, this is not my expertise. This is not something that I could ever personally recommend because it doesn't work for me. All right. So if you're interested in trading it, there is momentum there. But for me, I'm going to stay away. Walmart's up next. WMT. This is something solid. Thanks for recommending a solid. Home Depot, Walmart, all these nice companies that everyone knows about. They respect the technicals. Great names to trade. Great names. Walmart, what's going on in the pre-market? Opening inside of range. Again, doesn't really strike me as being potential for early morning trade. Some consolidation is unfolding. On the daily, we have seen a break of this significant 145, 146-ish resistance. Next target's clearly up here, 152s. Is it going to pull back a little bit is the question, though. I would say, nothing about this strikes me as, okay, there's opportunity early morning for a day trade. Again, opening in range like this strikes me as chop, two-sided trade. But if we do see a pullback, you obviously want to see 146 start to hold for a break and retest on your daily, something that does that. Important level to the downside to watch. So 146 holds in Walmart look attractive on pullbacks. From there, you would just look for an equal high reattempt around 150, right? So Walmart, consolidation or pullback may be likely based on the daily structure. Nothing about the chart is screaming, hey, obvious long setup, obvious short setup. So I would be patient and watch for that pullback. 146 wants to hold, all right? That's Walmart. What else do we have after that? Mrna. Let's take a look at mRNA. Oops, mRNA. There we go. mRNA vaccines. I shouldn't even say that word on the live stream. I heard they do things to your stream if you say that word. Anyways, regardless, doesn't matter. You can see we're chopping around in this big daily balance. I don't really think anything impressive happens on Mrna until we crack one way or another. In terms of what happened yesterday, you can get the sense that it was complete congestion, opening kind of in range still. Again, nothing about this chart says easy long, easy short. I suppose if you crack yesterday's highs, look for this level right here. Little dead cat bounce high around 181. If you crack this sort of level here on 177. And if it's lower, I would say maybe a break of 171 gets you to the bottom end of the range around 166. But overall, just look at where we are from the daily perspective. It's more likely that you get some more of this. And then, once the directional move is produced, that's where the easier trades start to set up. Okay, so patience in Mrna is what I would probably recommend. But again, you can look for some of these smaller scalps here and maybe underneath yesterday's low for the bottom end of the daily range. 4 minutes to go. We've got Mrna. We covered that one. What do we got? We covered Tesla. We covered Home Depot. We covered Mrna. PayPal is up next in order of what we got in the chat. PYPL. What's going on in PayPal? Daily bull flag tried to break, not really getting any follow through. Very similar to what we just saw in Netflix, right? It's very difficult for these stocks to kind of move higher as the broad market's cooling off and doesn't have that momentum anymore. So fake break, essentially. We were not able to hold above the high end of the flag there around 119.25. Let's quickly zoom in and take a look at our pre-market indications. Opening in the spike, not really, because you got the morning low down here. So this one's again just based on the daily, based on where we're opening. I don't really see the obvious trade on the early morning open. If it is higher, you have resistance right above at 118. If it's lower, you've got daily support at yesterday's low, and you're inside the midpoint of this congestion, right? So I don't really see a clean level that it wants to hold. I would be patient and wait for better moves, either off of 112.77, bottom end of the range here. Something that pulls back and holds that looks decent. It's not great, but it's decent. And then if that cracks, obviously that puts into play short ideas through the thin structure, right? If we move back higher, again, think about these highs that you have to contend with. I'm not seeing it as like a clean move that's just going to, give us nice momentum to the upside. So PayPal, patience is what I would sort of think about until we come into one of these inflection points, mainly 112, right? If we come into 112 and start holding, maybe it's a decent long opportunity just for a move back to the top of the range. But as of right now, midpoint, I'm not seeing it. Not seeing it based on the overnight indications either. What else do we have? NEO was up next from Big Boss. What do we have on NEO? This is a Chinese one gapping green over red, I believe. Yeah. Okay, so it is green over red, currently opening above yesterday's high. Does strike me as, almost the exact same as what we just discussed in Alibaba, KWeb, JD, all of those companies. You basically want to make sure that we hold up above either the opening print, or if we fill the gap, we hold up above the gap. That number is 22.25. As long as we do something like this, essentially look for follow through as shorts in here, absolutely get wrecked, right? On the daily perspective, what do we have for resistances overhead? In here, you can see a little bit, longs actually, I don't know. Let me scrunch up the 15. Yeah, okay, so thin structure. I'd probably start targeting this, to be quite honest with you, as the next level, 23.22. All right, 22.85, maybe it offers a bump in the road, but that's more significant based on the 15-minute time frame, the daily as well. So 23.22, if this holds here, about $1 move to the upside. It's not the most attractive thing to be trading for, but the options are cheap enough where you could probably take enough of them to make it worth your time. So that's NEO. Tesla, we already did that. Lowe's is essentially going to be the same as Home Depot, I would imagine. Let's quickly take a look. Yeah, okay. So Lowe's is actually more bearish, right? We mentioned this in the weekly watch this video as something to pay attention to. This did not hold. So it's got to be more bearish, right? Clearly breaking back down. Let's see where we are in relationship to that. Right at that support. Is it going to give us an oversold bounce? Maybe. I wouldn't chase it short at this point in time around that 202, right? So we've got about 30 seconds till the bell. Quickly looking at our futures. Has anything changed here? The answer to that question is no. Again, I'm expecting chop through this area right here. It's a Friday. I'm not pushing my luck. I want to be patient for setups that happen at the spike top or at yesterday's low of day. We're opening right in between the two. I'm not seeing a reason to be overly active on the open based on a majority of our other companies as well opening in their spike ranges. So on your way out, guys, if you wouldn't mind, hit the thumbs up button. I appreciate that. I wish you all a green trading day. Go into the weekend with a clear and level head. Don't do anything crazy. And don't forget as well, there's the bell. Join the Discord. It's completely free. There's the link right down below. And with all of that being said, stay green on a Friday. Keep your mind clear. Go into the weekend with the ability to relax, okay? That's what I've got for you. I'm being patient on the open, which is why we're going over just a little bit here. Nothing kind of crazy happening, just getting that two-sided activity so far inside of the spike as we discussed, okay? So I'm being patient. Yesterday's low, spike top. That's what I want to see happen here in the ES before getting active. Quickly taking a look at some of our setups. Tesla was one of them that we wanted to watch. 1082, inverted hammer starting to form. Yep. Okay. Yeah, so Tesla could be in play here, guys. Let's see how the first 5-minute bar closes around that 182. I don't want to get, again, don't want to get overly active on the first couple of minutes as we're trying to resolve these areas. Okay, larger upper wick. Yeah, something worth watching. What is the ES doing? Red. All right, back and forth through the open a couple times. All right, anyways, I'm going to wrap up the stream. I wish you, again, all a green trading weekend. Well, week, day. See, this is why patience is needed on the open. It's not just, blast it short. Trying to resolve that 1082. I'm going to continue to watch this, guys. This is primarily what I'm going to focus on. But anyways, thank you all for tuning in. ES, a little bit of that lower wick continuing to form. Again, not really seeing the reason to be overly aggressive just yet. But yeah. All right. If you've stuck through my little blabbering as the market's now open, I appreciate you. Nonetheless, that truly is going to be the end of the stream. Hope to see you all soon. M2M Trading Solutions. Great green cash bag in the chat. Appreciate the support of the channel. Nice to see everyone. All right. John C., Ida, Couch, Netstar, Tarushi, Muhammad. All of you guys have a great weekend. If I missed your name, don't worry. I see you in the chat. I just can't get them all. So that's truly it. Enough rambling. See you guys.